Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you for joining us this evening. Again, this is our fourth installment of the Sustainability Forum series here at the downtown branch of the Ann Arbor District Library. This series brings change makers, community members, leaders in the sustainability space to get together and just talk about the exciting and inspiring work that they do. My name is Jordan Larson, and I'm a staff member with Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations, and we're thrilled to be a host for this series this year. We've got a really exciting evening to share with you, and again, we're glad that you took some of your evening time when it's really sunny out and beautiful out to join us. But this fourth session of the series, we are gathering together tonight to celebrate the A2ZERO Community Cookbook, which I know many of you here in the audience were contributors of. And we've got a bunch of folks here to share their stories. Again, you don't want to hear from me too much, so I'm just going to cover some basics around kind of the series in general, and then the agenda for this evening, and then I'll pass it off to those who you're excited to hear tonight. So this event is part of a 5-part monthly Sustainability Forum series. We have one more session coming up before we conclude for the year. That will be taking place on May 26th, and this last session will be focused on building social resilience, talking about our ambassador program and finding ways to connect in your own neighborhood, and talk about climate change and talk about sustainability and reconnect with your neighbors. So we really hope that you'll join us for this final session next month. But for this evening, I'll just give a really quick rundown of the agenda for tonight. So I'll start us off by giving a few introductions to our panel speakers. Then there will be a couple of presentations, followed by a cooking demonstration or a food preparation demonstration. Now, this is something we have never done before as part of the sustainability series or sustainability forums. So we're super excited to bring that to you tonight. And that it includes some samples at the end. So everyone's going to get a little bit of a goodie to try. And at that point, we'll also do some Q&A with our food demonstrators and our presenters. So if you have any questions throughout the presentations, take a little note, keep track of those, and then we'll have some time to discuss in the room. Then to kind of close out the session tonight, we're going to do a rapid fire of a number of personal stories of contributors to the A2ZERO Community Cookbook. Kind of what the recipes are, how they're personally important to folks. And again, we're really excited to share some of these stories with you. And again, we encourage you to check out the cookbook itself, which is out by our A2ZERO table in the back afterward. Finally, we're going to close out the evening by sharing a few resources and a little bit more information around some additional upcoming events and resources to keep folks engaged in the work we're doing. And we'll always have a little bit of time to have casual conversations with folks after we wrap up for tonight. So that's what we've got planned for this evening. Again, thank you for coming. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Up first, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Azella Markgraf. Within the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, Azella work focuses on programs and initiatives that advance a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable community food system in Ann Arbor. A native of Central Ohio, Azella has a professional background in regenerative agriculture, farmers market and nonprofit management, and food justice advocacy. She received a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and anthropology from Davidson College, where she focused her research on understanding how local communities imagine, interpret, and respond to the climate crisis. Azella describes herself as a passionate lover of all things fresh and delicious, and sees growing and sharing food as an important opportunity to foster meaningful connections between people, food, and the land. Next up, I would like to introduce Kim Corona. As a program manager at Veg Michigan, Kim works to introduce Michiganders to the health, environmental, and ethical benefits of plant-based eating through positive experiences and great tasting food. She previously served as the senior program director for HEART, a humane education organization, where she taught thousands of young people about social justice, environmental conservation, and animal protection. And she was also an adjunct professor at the University of Denver. Kim holds an MED from Cambridge College in Massachusetts in affiliation with the Institute of Humane Education, or IHE, in Maine, and a certificate in humane education from IHE. She received her BA from Goddard College in Vermont in affiliation with Green Mountain College after completing her senior study on confined animal feeding operations. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Andres. Richard is a farmer, philosopher, and former carpenter who has developed one of the largest and most successful CSA farms in Michigan. Richard's background includes employment on a farm as a teenager and 5 years at the Ann Arbor and Toronto Zen Buddhist temples. During Richard's early career, he worked as a timber framer carpenter. In 1993, he purchased the original 40-acre Tantre farm property while continuing to work as a carpenter. He achieved organic certification that year and began growing staple crops like potatoes, winter squash, garlic, and melons for wholesale accounts. Richard returned to work as a full-time farmer when he and his wife, Deb Lentz, transitioned Tantre Farms into a full-fledged community-supported agriculture, or CSA, farm with 30 members in 2001. Now with over 300 members, Richard and Deb have expanded Tantre Farm to 115 acres, where they grow many types of fruits and vegetables annually, along with herbs, mushrooms, and flowers. And now last but certainly not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Deb Lentz. Deb is an educator, farmer, and organizer who grew up on a 160-acre farm in Lake City, Minnesota. She graduated from the College of St. Benedict in Minnesota with a BA in elementary education and taught grades 1 through 6 throughout her 16 years as a school teacher. Deb is a co-owner in Tantre Farm in Chelsea, where she manages the communications and outreach for the farm, handles the finances, develops educational programs, and much more. Since 2010, Deb has been a board member for the Agrarian Adventure, a nonprofit organization which partners with K-12 schools to enrich students' connection between the food they eat, their health, the health of their communities, and the environment. She has led many farmer in-classroom presentations for elementary school students in Ann Arbor schools since 2008. At Honey Creek Community School in Ann Arbor, Deb was a parent organizer for the PTO Wellness Committee for 9 years, founded and coordinated the Farm to School program, and supported the School Garden Committee. In addition, she is currently on the Market Advisory Board for the Chelsea Farmers Market. Join me in welcoming all 4 of our presenters tonight. As you can see on the slide, we will also have a number of additional speakers who will be sharing their stories from the cookbooks, but we will be introducing each of them one by one a little bit later in the evening tonight. But with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to A2ZERO Markgraf to share a little bit of information about food systems in Ann Arbor and the Cookbook Initiative. Thanks, A2ZERO.
Thank you, Jordan, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. I think I know many of you, but if I don't know you already, my name is A2ZERO Markgraf, as Jordan said. I'm a Sustainable Food Coordinator with the Ann Arbor Office of Sustainability and Innovations. So the City of Ann Arbor Office of Sustainability and Innovations works to advance A2ZERO. How many of you are familiar with A2ZERO? Wow, okay. Amazing. So just as a recap, for those of you who may be less familiar with A2ZERO, A2ZERO is the city's plan to achieve a just and equitable transition to community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. So A2ZERO has 7 strategies that encompass a broad range of sustainability topics, from renewable energy to transportation to community resilience and natural features. So as you can see, the Ann Arbor community has made an ambitious commitment to advance a more sustainable future. We're rethinking the ways that we live, work, and play across all aspects of life. And just like the ways that we power our homes or get around in the city, the food that we eat is one important piece of this climate action journey. And it comes into A2ZERO strongly in our 5th strategy, which is strategy 5, changing the way that we use, reuse, and dispose of materials. So that's why we're here tonight, of course. And as Jordan mentioned, my role at OSI is focused on building a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient food system in collaboration with the many amazing people who've been doing this for decades in our community. When I first joined the team at OSI, most of my conversations with residents in Ann Arbor started with one simple question: what is sustainable food? Usually followed up by another question: how do I know what food is sustainable? Or how do I eat more sustainably? And the thing is, because our food system, which is the interconnected web of people, organizations, places, and activities involved in producing, processing, distributing, consuming, and disposing of food, that system is quite complicated. So it actually makes answering that question of what is sustainable food a little bit difficult to answer. And from a high level, there are many ways that we could define sustainable food. Sustainable food generally comes from food systems that conserve natural resources, protect healthy ecosystems, promote strong and healthy soil, and the well-being and health of people and communities involved in getting food from our farms to our tables and then dealing with it once we dispose of it. Ideally, not so much of that. This can include farming methods that reduce chemical use, conserve water, maintain soil health, promote animal welfare, and support fair labor and local economies. In OSI, we're working to create a future where all Ann Arbor residents can feed themselves and their families through fair, sustainable, and equitable supply chains in which nothing goes to waste and residents know their food choices will nourish themselves, their communities, and the planet. Specifically, our food and climate work focuses on these three goals. First is reducing diet-related greenhouse gas emissions, which you'll hear more about from Kim in just a moment. Second is preventing and recovering food from going to waste. So third is increasing the resilience of our food supply chain to disruptions and disasters related to climate change. And this includes promoting sustainable and regenerative agricultural practices. But what does this all mean for us as residents, for you and I making food choices in our daily lives? Well, many of us have received conflicting messages and information about what makes food sustainable, or the actions that we have to take as people to eat more sustainably. Should we be eating organic vegetables, grass-fed beef, free-range eggs? Should we be worried about antibiotics and preservatives and pesticides, and what's the fuss about GMOs? It can be challenging to learn what each of these terms mean, which ones are legally defined and which ones are not, and which are most aligned with your personal values. For those who care about making responsible food choices, it can feel overwhelming, and we can be feeling like we have to give up foods that, enrich our lives, make us happy, bring us comfort, or are part of our family traditions. But the reality is that there is no single perfect way to eat food sustainably. And in fact, there are many beloved, delicious, sustainable dishes that our community and people across the world eat every day as part of a sustainable diet. So to help us further our goals of helping residents eat a more sustainable diet, we decided to create a community cookbook that can translate complex sustainability information into everyday practical actions that residents can take to eat more sustainably. And at the same time, we hoped to draw from and celebrate the many beautiful, joyful ways that our community is already taking action to build a more sustainable food system, whether that's through a recipe, their life work, or their community advocacy. Our hope is that through the cookbook, we can show the many joyful ways that our community is approaching sustainable food and help it feel more approachable rather than daunting or overwhelming. So what can I do to support a more sustainable food system? This cookbook focuses on 3 science-backed actions that residents can take to eat more sustainably. These aren't the only ways to eat sustainably, but they're 3 that are backed by many decades of climate research. Eating more plants, because plant-based foods can have a lower carbon impact than meat and dairy. Wasting less food at home, because 30 to 40% of the food that we have in this country ends up uneaten. And third, choosing foods grown and produced locally to support a more resilient and equitable food system and community here in Ann Arbor. By focusing on these 3 goals, we aimed to cut through some of that noisy messaging we talked about earlier. Each recipe in the cookbook is a dish that can help Ann Arbor residents take one of these 3 core actions and is inspired by members of our community who've made sustainable food part of their life's work. Now, I'd like to turn it over to another contributor to our community cookbook, Kim Corona. Thank you all for your time.
On behalf of Veg Michigan, I want to say it's truly an honor to be here this evening and for us to be a collaborator with the city of Ann Arbor on their A2ZERO plan. We at Veg Michigan have worked hard to introduce Michiganders to the benefits of eating more plant-based. And in working with the city, we have been able to focus on how eating more plant-forward is good for the environment. So this evening, I'm going to talk a little bit about food and the environment. So our organization has been around for 27 years. We were a nonprofit organization. We were all volunteer for the first 18 years. And then we were lucky enough to grow to have full-time staff, which has made it possible for us to have this collaboration with the city and do work on this full-time. So there is a lot of connections between our food and the planet, and like Azella said, it is complicated, and there are no one right answer for how to eat. But what we encourage is, because all of us do eat, to have a responsibility to think about the impact that our food choices have, not only on ourselves, but also on other people, on other species on the planet, and on our communities. So I wanted to start with just a little trivia. According to the United Nations, approximately what percentage of all human-caused greenhouse gases is linked to food? And as I used to do with my students in the classroom, I'm going to ask you if you feel brave enough to put your hands up if you think it's 1, 3%, 2, 13%, 3, 23%, or 4, 33%. So you can put your fingers up. If you're a little shy, you can keep it to yourself, or you can just think it in your mind. And I will reveal that according to the United Nations, it is 33%. So I see a lot of you thought that, or you were close. If you knew it, that's great. If you didn't, that's why we're here to learn. And the reason why food sustainability is so important to the A2ZERO initiative is because it is about 1/3 of all human-caused greenhouse gases. And this is our whole food system. Like Azella said, our food system is complex. It's the food that's grown and processed, how it's transported, distributed, prepared, consumed, and disposed of. So there's a lot to think about in each of these steps. According to the United Nations, some of the biggest climate contributors related to food is the methane from cattle's digestive system. And I always say, it is not the cow's fault. That is just how they digest food. But we are mass producing many more cows than would have ever normally been on the earth. It is also from the nitrous oxide from fertilizers that is used for crop production. Much of it is grown for feedstock to feed the animals, and for the emissions released from manure management. According to the Center for Sustainable Systems at U of M, they analyzed 10 different foods to see the pounds of greenhouse gases per serving. And as you can see, the animal foods tend to release more greenhouse gases than the plant-based foods. They also have a chart that shows the average diet for someone in the US and the greenhouse gas contributions. And as you can see, an average plate, a lot of the greenhouse gases are coming from animal products, and less of that is coming from plant-based products. According to Project Drawdown, which is a leading nonprofit organization working to mitigate climate change, when they analyzed 20 things that individuals can do to impact climate change, the top 2 things were food-related: eating more plant-forward and reducing our food waste. And that goes a lot to what Azella was talking about. So they're not saying that it has to be all or nothing, but just eating more plant-rich is a way that individuals can lower our carbon footprint and helping to reduce our food waste. And then eating locally is also good for community resilience. We know that climate change is a big systemic issue, so it's not all on our individual choices. We have to make systemic change. But in terms of lowering our carbon footprint and thinking about our food choices, these are just some actions that we can take. So I just wanted to share some of the work that we're doing in collaboration with the city to spread awareness about the benefits of being more plant-forward and reducing our carbon footprint. So we work to spread awareness about the connection between food and climate. We work to support individuals who are interested in eating more plant-forward if they want to know how and they want to have support and tips and guidance. And then we're also working with organizations and food service businesses and adopting plant-forward policies and practices. So if you want to learn more about the work we're doing, you can go to vegmichigan.org/climate. One of the ways that we support individuals in eating more plant-forward is through our 30-day plant-based pledge. So individuals who decide that they want to eat some more plant-forward meals for a month, they can receive a bag of free plant-based food items that they choose. And then we give them supportive emails once a week for the month, and then they do a survey at the end. We have had nearly 2,000 Ann Arborites who have participated over the last 2.5 years, and over 90% of our survey respondents from the program say that they'll continue to eat more plant-forward afterwards. If you want to help us to spread the word, we can have a lot of fun with this, right? So eating should be communal. So you can host a Plantify party at your home or your work or a sport group that you're part of or a leisure group that you're part of. And we'll bring some plant-based meals to them, and we'll give a little talk, and we'll talk about some barriers or challenges and how we can support people in eating more plant-forward. And if you have any connections with organizations that serve food or food service businesses in Ann Arbor, please come see me at the end at our table and let us know how we can maybe get involved with them and support them if they want to know more about our work and how they can get involved. And we encourage you to stay connected with us. We have a newsletter that comes out the first of every month, so you can sign up for it, so you can learn a little bit more about plant-forward eating. And we have a monthly meetup in Ann Arbor where we support restaurants and food service businesses that have plant-based options so that people know about where those options are and they can try them, and we can support those businesses and build community. And we have one coming up in May at Al Harissa, for any of you who are familiar with that restaurant, and they were one of the leaders in showing their menu and the carbon footprint of their different food items. So they're a really great local place to support, but there are so many plant-based options in Ann Arbor, and we like to support many of those businesses. So you can stay in touch with all the different places that we're at every month. So with that, I just want to thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming here to think about food and sustainability. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to our guests who are going to do a beautiful food demo for us.
We're ready to do it?
Time for demo.
Yeah, okay. So most of these things that make up this salad are very simple foods and something that maybe peasants would eat. And it takes a certain macrobiome to grow these in the soil, but it also takes a special microbiome in the belly to get the full benefit. So if you're not used to eating raw vegetables, it might take you some time. Like, somebody that has to build up their muscles, it might take you some time to get used to eating raw vegetables. But this is a simple, user-free, easy way to prepare them is with this shredder. And somebody that's 73 or somebody that's 3 years old can shred vegetables. And you can eat a whole lot more shredded vegetables than if you're just eating it like a gorilla. And we're used to having prepared foods, and we're used to preparing them by hand. So taking time to carefully prepare is part of the process. And if you're preparing it for yourself, fine. But if you're preparing it for your friends, family, neighbor, then you have that loving gesture there that's very key to keeping things going, because we are a very social animal. Within our context, we're looking at the globe and seeing that we're in the 6th great extinction event right now. So we're going to lose most of the wild animals very quickly, and we're substituting domesticated animals so that we can exhaust the overproduction of corn and beans that's being sold below market and is subsidized by the federal government. So we have a little strange economy where we have all this overproduction, and these guys need to stay in business because they're kind of locked into this. But it creates a monoculture desert for 90% of the arable land in the continent. So you think about that, and where's the ecology? Well, ecology is based on relationships. And I was talking to Therapu, and I was very pleased to hear that her son is at the biological station, and he's becoming an ecologist. And they'd spent some time on the farm. But understanding relationships, looking at relationships, not looking at just production to serve the market or to overserve the market and sell your crops at a loss so that they can be pushed through 66 billion chickens a year so that we can have cheap McNuggets or whatever that is that we're feeling like we want to eat. Chicken Jello. The salad I'm making is maybe a little bit of counterpoint to that. And so what you see is you see a very finely, easily almost pre-chewed item here. So you can put it in your mouth and you can eat a whole lot more than if you're, just chewing on one of these, which that's fine if you want to do that. And the same with a simple carrot. These are all really simple foods. They take 2 to 3 months to grow. You can get 20 to 30 tons per acre, and you can store them seasonally in a root cellar. So we have 5 months of frozen weather. Ta-da! We have perfect refrigeration for Michigan. And so it's a lot less energy to use the climate than to try to just keep growing, or keep importing baby greens from California, which that's a nice thing to have, but it's also, I think, what did Michael Pollan say? 5,700 calories for 1 calorie. So to bring lettuce, baby lettuce from California, 5,700 to 1. So this beats it in terms of our efficiency. That's an easy thing for us to accomplish here. And the nutrition is good. The colors are beautiful. You can get a rainbow of colors. Here's some purple. It has some anthocyanin in it. I guess if you guys know much about nutrition, you probably appreciate that. A lot of people get a little put off by these purple carrots because they think that they're burnt or rotten or something. But the anthocyanin is something that can open up your capillaries, and it can help energize you. And that can be a little scary for a lot of us when we get too much energy. In fact, for a while I was getting so much energy and happiness, I had to run to the donut store and eat a bunch of donuts and coffee just to kind of calm myself down. So here's a beet. This is a 55-day Merlin beet. It's not unlike a sugar beet. It has about the same content of sugar as a sugar beet, which people like. And you can see all these pretty colors here that are blended in these proportions. So there's about a dozen things that we can keep in a root cellar over the winter, and it provides us with a variety of color and nutrition and minerals, and also fiber. So different shapes of fiber are very important for building our internal biome, which also gives us a little serotonin release. So it also has a psychic aspect of it too. So if the old saying was, if somebody's kind of crabby, give them some X-Lax. I would say, how about a root cellar salad? just to help them feel a little better. This is a little lemon juice, and that'll take that sweetness down a little bit, and it'll give a little sweet sour. Here's some pumpkin seeds that are salted that we bought. They're a very lovely, nutritious, kind of a salty, savory. And then here is some sunflower oil that was grown by the Gates farm. They come to the farmer's market, and they just started making soybean oil.
Not soybean.
I'm sorry, sunflower oil.
It was soybean.
Sunflower oil. So, you know, if you like an oil and you want to use a local oil, this is a fine cold pressed oil. So there you have it. The root cellar salad. Every root cellar salad is an original, and you can play with the proportions. We could have made it a lot simpler. We could just do beets and storage kohlrabi or beets and cabbage. The main thing really to appreciate is when you finally shred this and put it out, you can eat a lot more than if you're just trying to chew it up. So that really helps. We used to make these giant bowls of this and have it. I had some young people living on the farm, and they would just go to town making this stuff every night, and we'd have big bowls of it. So that's kind of where this came from. So I guess that's, I don't know what else to say here. If there's any thoughts or questions, I could respond.
What was the white vegetable you started with?
This is a storage cabbage. So, and it's just, we put big bins of this in our root cellar, and when it's cold, we open the doors of the root cellar, and eventually we get the root cellar down about 35, 32 degrees, and we can store tons of food down there all winter. So again, it's part of this thinking is building a culture for this, building a consciousness, building a understanding of our place in the ecosystem. We have a place. We're a very destructive and dominant feature, but we could change that and learn to appreciate, you know, other life forms and our place better. So, yes.
Yeah, really quick before we get into more questions, we have a dedicated time now for Q&A, but as we're doing Q&A, I do want to invite folks to come over to this side table and pick up one of the samples of the salad. So we're going to have someone coming around with the mic to capture all the Q&A questions, particularly for the folks participating through the live stream. Having it on the mic will allow them to hear the questions. So yeah, if you have a question, please just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. And for everyone else, in the meantime, you're welcome to pop on up and grab a sample and take a seat while we go through some Q&A for our panelists. All right, so I think we had a question up front here.
Actually, this is appropriate as we're getting it sampled. I was wondering if you have suggestions as to how to get our, quote, American stomachs acclimated to the raw vegetables, because you talked about the different microbiome that's necessary. And maybe we don't have, so maybe just a little bit at a time, or 3 times a week, or just go for it.
I think getting together with family and with people and have a dinner together and be together in that way. We share some meals on the farm every day, so we kind of have a captured audience. All the workers have to show up to eat lunch together, and all the workers have to cook lunch. So, and the other rule is we got to use what's on the farm. So, creating a structure, creating a social structure would be really helpful. which used to be, you know, our family, or our neighborhood. You know, I have some memories of growing up in a neighborhood where we had a few times where we gathered and shared food, and I always remember that as like a very important time. As far as the gut, well, I think, yeah, I think just, yeah, I mean, that's one, if you want to start small and increase, that would be one way. This is a simple way to do it, because we make it taste kind of delicious with the lemon juice and the seeds. But yeah, having a positive experience with something. You know, I know if you're going to eat kale, sometimes people they'll steam a kale and it'll be a big blob of kale. Or having a recipe that has some culture behind it can also be a doorway in. So some of the ethnic foods.
And I think we had another question up front here. Yeah.
How to build a cellar to store root vegetables?
How to build it? Well, the simplest is probably just digging a hole and building a container inside of it, and then a lid, and then you can cover it with soil. But it takes some coordination. I mean, you want to have some air infiltration ideally, but you can do it just as simply as having an underground cask. Or a cool part of the basement that can be walled off. Some of the older homes around Ann Arbor definitely have root cellars in them. Could be under a porch where there was a cement wall and then air was allowed in, or restricted if it got too cold. Those things used to be designed into our houses, and we still have some houses like that around town here. One of the guys at the market years ago, he told me, I was selling potatoes for $2 a quart, and he said, you know, when I first started here in the 30s, we'd deliver 3 bushels of potatoes for $1, and we'd carry them into the root cellar or the basement for people. So it just gave there's a little different time, a little different technology, a simpler technology. And if we're moving into a low energy future where we have to pay attention to how we use the very convenient petroleum, then we want to look at these simpler ways of storing food and living. So.
Any more questions? Well, I have one for both Richard and Deb. You know, your lives and your careers have taken you in multiple directions, and since coming back to farming, I'm curious, what have you learned, not just about food, but your work with Tantre Farm? What are some of the things that you've learned with that experience? Trying to get Deb on the mic here.
Here I am. For me, one of the things that I learned was just that our neighbors and our community are an important part of our system, you know, our ecosystem, if you want to call it that. You know, in teaching, there's also a relationship that we have with the students and the parents and the administration, but with this, there's a connection with food and land and water and each other, and so it's a very well-rounded and very satisfying lifestyle. So that has brought me. I love being outside, and so I was raised on a farm, and it was nice. Even though I love teaching too, it was a way to combine both of them for me, because the one thing we do is teach people about food and how to respect and appreciate the earth and each other. So that's what, for me, is satisfying.
Thank you.
Well, we did bring some hazelnuts in that box, if anybody'd like to take a few hazelnuts home. Speaking of relationships, the probably the most efficient way to grow food and build soil is with a polyculture of perennials. So perennial nuts, perennial fruits, native plants that are deeply rooted, that can build soil. You know, we've lost half the topsoil globally. So if we're going to continue, we need to, you know, rebuild the soil. And the perennials, because we're not tilling to produce carbohydrates and minerals and vitamins, they're the thing that can teach us that. And so having that in mind and looking to nature as the measure, and, you know, putting it in the curriculum of our schools, that, you know, really understanding all the relationships that are involved with the whole ecology. So looking at the whole, you know, rather than breaking things apart, to extract new technologies and new energies, to start to look as a whole. And the native plants, now those are the things that are teaching us about how to survive a drought, how to build resistance from pandemics if it's a mixed crop. You don't, nature never has monoculture. So, you know, if we're looking at nature as the measure, you know, we could begin to have that as our farm. I still grow these silly annual crops, and that's kind of what we trade for money to pay the mortgage. But we've also put a little time and effort into the perennials. And so quite a bit of the land that we have is being managed in that way, either mainly just by allowing nature to flourish in wild spaces, whether it's a wetlands or a woods or a prairie, and just being able to appreciate and learn from the birds and the insects, you know, how to create that resilience that sustains everyone, all beings. So I guess that's still a lot to learn in that respect. How to make money with it is a different equation. But to go back to somebody like Thoreau, commerce curses everything it touches. Even if you were to recite prayers to heaven and accept even a penny, those prayers would be none other than curses. And so you think about, you know, the market economy and what's the value there? Well, the value is just to accumulate more. And that's sort of what we're kind of caught in with the global growth economy and a 6-continent supply chain. We're kind of stuck with that. So how do we get out of it? Good question. I think looking at native ecosystems, looking at what was here before we projected an extractive industrial economy.
Thank you, Richard. I think we have some more questions from the audience here.
Thanks. So you're talking a lot about like relationships and community, which I'm an educator, and so that really resonates. And I was thinking about how historically farmers were revered. And as we've become a more and more technological society, it seems like our young people, we've almost kind of raised them to idolize technocrats. And so now what we see is farmland being turned into data centers. And so I'm just kind of wondering, and I guess this is a question for anybody literally, like, do you have any ideas how we get our young people kind of recentered so that they are not idolizing these technocrats and having their land basically stolen from them before they even realize how valuable it is?
I'd like to say something. One of the things I think is that we need to get the kids on the earth. They need to go to the farms. They need to go to volunteer, or we have farm tours on the farm. We've got ages from little preschoolers all the way to the alumni at U of M, the Gardening Association. Having kids come and, they remember. We've been now doing this for over 30 years, and I have, this year, one of the kids that grew up swinging on the walnut tree is coming to work on the farm, and has looked at different things in his life that he was wanting to do at U of M, where he went to school, and he struggled, with just trying to fit in and figure out what he wanted to do, and he found out he really likes being active and being outside. And there are some kids that gravitate towards being inside, I guess, and the puzzle and the of technology and the riddles of it. But I think when kids grow from a very, very young age, bringing their kids to the farm and helping pick tomatoes, or playing in the dirt and getting really dirty and eating dirt, whatever it takes. In our farm, we do edible farm tours, and there's something magical about it for kids that don't come from that. And if you don't expose your kids to that, they are more fascinated with technology. And it's not going to be all kids, but it's going to be one kid. I'm always about one kid. If we can get one kid that changes their mind or moves in that direction, we've done something, because they'll reach out, maybe become an educator, and reach that many more people. So that's my...
Yeah,
Are you familiar with Luke Kemp? I think you might appreciate him. He just wrote a book called The Curse, or Goliath's Curse, which is about this situation where you have a dominance hierarchy. And, everybody's behind it because there's money to be made, and there's $9 billion coming to the economy, so you have everybody supporting it. And politicians can point to the fact that, oh, we're building this big thing, we're making things happen. But it's not so popular to go out and celebrate people that are pulling weeds from the dirt, or filling up a root cellar, or thinking about ecology. How do you make money that way? That's how we're looking at these dominance hierarchies. We don't even assess value. We don't see value, we just see, oh, there's money. It's just money. And it's dominance and power. And ultimately, I think, Luke Kemp did an exhaustive research on the anthropology of why all concentrated civilizations, or Goliaths, as he refers to them, fail. So it's an exhaustive global look at the demise of civilizations that create these kind of hierarchies. And we're no different. We're just more technical, and we've advanced with reductionistic science. So rather than using science to understand relationships, we're reducing down to the subatomic level so we can create more technology to create more dominance rather than looking at the whole. Like, if we want the reductionist science to be in service to the whole, well, great. Let's get going on it. Let's get going on that. But, you know, you have to have kind of a vision for that. So that's what I would contribute here.
Yeah, and I want to share a little story about how I started working in food. I think that speaks to this question that you're asking. My first job in food systems, I managed a farmer's market in Ohio, and we have this annual tomato tasting event. It's a really great event where you can come and taste the variety of tomatoes that are grown in your community. And I will never forget, it was a transformative moment for my life, being behind the table, serving different types of cherry tomatoes, and a kid coming up and saying, I don't like vegetables, right? This kid, you know, he really was set on the fact that he hated tomatoes. And so I was like, you know, this tomato is my favorite. I pointed out a Sun Gold tomato, if you're familiar with Sun Golds, and I contributed a recipe to the cookbook to use Sun Gold tomatoes because they really are a pivotal moment for my career in food systems. I said, this is nature's candy. And he's like, candy? And so, you know, he tried a tomato and he goes, wow, I did not know that it was gonna taste this good. It tastes like candy. And I said, yeah, it does. And when food comes from soil that is healthy, and when food comes from ecosystems that are, you know, protected, that tastes really good. And the joy that was on his face was just in food and a relationship to land for young people. It's thinking about how do we spark that joy, that sense of like, this is nature's candy, and want them to try more. And then I watched that kid go from that plate and try every one of the 300 tomatoes that were at that tomato tasting. And so, you know, there's so many great events in Ann Arbor. There's so many great people in Ann Arbor who are doing this and recreating that experience for people. And we're really fortunate to live in a community with that opportunity. And so just getting young people to think about the fact that your food doesn't come from a grocery store, it comes from the ground. It comes from the forests or the fisheries or the places where we're, you know, out in nature, that it can help them make that connection to the fact that their food is not just something yucky from a grocery store, right? It's a moment of joy and connection with a place, and it's a experience that really can lead them down you know, a path of discovery in their life that can be super, super creative and joyful. So this part of what I hope that we can all, you know, experience with making recipes from a community cookbook or going to events in our community and trying different things. So just thinking about sparking curiosity.
Thanks, Isella. I don't know about you, I definitely want to eat that cherry tomato now. I think we have time for one more question, if we have another question from the audience. Anyone have a question? All right, well then I might ask one more question. This could go to either Isella or Kim. I'm curious, as both of you have worked on the community cookbook, Isella, you in particular have put an immense amount of work into the community cookbook. I think from what we've seen in these presentations so far, we can see many different ways that a community cookbook can have a positive impact. But I'm curious from your perspective, what is one of your favorite things, or from your own experience working on the cookbook, that has come out of that project?
Well, I'll share something briefly, and then I definitely hope Isella has time to say something, because it really, you know, was a project that you put together that I think was so important and integral for the community and coming together. I know that, you know, when I saw the cookbook come to life, what I thought was the most beautiful thing about it, and it goes so much to what Richard has been saying about relationships, is it wasn't just about the food and how the food could be sustainable for, you know, reducing waste or being more plant forward or being local, but also about people's stories, which is what we're going to be sharing this evening. And so I think sometimes people think, if I'm doing this thing like for this greater good, that it has to be a sacrifice. But I think this community cookbook shows that it's doing something for the greater good, and it's enriching all of us. And so it's not a sacrifice, but it's something that ends up fulfilling all of us. So when I saw the cookbook and I would read the stories connected to it, it brought them to life and it brought the community to life. And so it just shows how food can bring us all together. So it's doing this greater, wonderful thing, and it's also doing something beautiful and wonderful for all of us. So I think it just shows how food should be something deep and beautiful. And I'm not saying that every food choice I make is always the most conscious or thoughtful. I do sometimes eat whatever junk food is there, but that this cookbook reminds us to be thoughtful about our food choices and to think about where that food is coming from, and that there's a story behind it, whether it's someone's family tradition or cultural tradition or the farmers that made that food come to our table, that there's a whole rich story behind that food. And I think that goes to what Deb and Azella said about having young people see the story behind it. Because when you do go to the grocery store, we don't think about, whatever age we are, we don't always think about where that food is coming from and the impact that it had. But this cookbook shows us to really think about the story behind the food and behind the people that make beautiful recipes.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I mean, I really couldn't have said it better. I think what for me was so exciting about this project, well, selfishly, I got to go around and talk to all the lovely, amazing people who are featured in the cookbook in stories, and getting to know all of you and all of the people who aren't in this room who are part of the project has been like extremely amazing, and I encourage you to get to know everybody who is here and also featured in the book, and to support all of the people who are doing great work on the ground in the community to make our food system more sustainable. So selfishly, that was my favorite part. But also just the amount of conversations that I had with people in Ann Arbor who, when I was like, I'm making a community cookbook for the city, and they were like, well, I don't have any sustainable recipes. I was like, I'm sure you do. And there are so many awesome ways that you can eat sustainably. And the conversations that we had around what does it mean to eat a sustainable meal were really amazing and eye-opening, and so many people are eating food in so many different ways that are so personal to them, and so just getting to share that abundance and diversity and the stories behind that's just been a real pleasure. So thank you all for being a part of it, and thanks to all of the folks who aren't in this room who were also a part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Azella. With that, I think we're going to transition into a handful of more stories from the cookbook. Again, we think the voices and the contributions from our community members are the most amazing and important part of this project, and so we're super grateful to have a handful of them here with us tonight. So I'm going to pass it back to Azella, who's going to introduce each of our storytellers.
Is this one still on?
Yeah. Okay, close.
Well, first up tonight is Caitlin Yevzelman. She's from Cedarfield Farm. Come on up, Caitlin.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's been such an honor to be part of this cookbook. My name's Caitlin Yevzelman, like Azella said. My husband and I, Simon, run Cedarfield Farm. We've been located in Belleville for the last 2 years because we're on leased land. That kind of fell through this past year, so we're moving to a farm on Romulus. My connection to Ann Arbor is that I'm a Spartan. Sorry. We run an aggregate CSA, so I'm actually out here every week. We kind of have our roles where the women spend the time rolling the egg rolls and the men fry them, and there's never anything left at the end of the day. So this is my quick fix. You can really use whatever you have on hand. I try to keep this kind of seasonal. That salad would be great in it. I find that if you keep a couple spices and sauces on hand, you can really make this with anything that you have that's hanging around. So traditionally it's like made with carrots and root vegetables and cabbage and onions. If you have garlic and ginger, that really elevates the dish. and sauces like oyster sauce and fish sauce for dipping. And in this kind of season right now, like fresh herbs and crisp lettuce would be really great to use as a dip with it. So I hope you'll try it if you are reading the cookbook. It's really meant to be a loose recipe. I'm not much of a recipe follower myself. But again, it's been such an honor to be part of this project. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Jennifer Davis, who contributed produce box stew.
I have my little notes here. Oh, thank you. So, hi, I'm Jen Davis. I grew up just south of Ann Arbor in Saline, but I've lived in Ann Arbor my whole adult life. I contributed the recipe, the CSA or produce box stew. I'm going to tell you the story of how this recipe came to be. It was March 29, 2024. And while many people were getting ready for egg searches or bunny visits, Julie, Missy, and I were setting up camp at Holly State Recreation Area on the Maple Loop for our squirrel camp. Missy brought in her rickety little camper, and Julie and I were going to try and stay in our tent despite temperatures that were predicted to be highs in the 40s. And I was getting a little bit nervous, to be perfectly honest, about our prospects because it was going to be so cold and the chance of rain. Was there even a chance for us to find any squirrels? So squirrel camp is an opportunity for us to spend time together to hunt squirrels. In March, it's the very end of the season, so it was our last opportunity to do that and to plan future camps together. As luck would have it, the temperatures were colder than predicted, and the rain was turning to snow, and the squirrels proved to be smarter than us, and they were nowhere to be found. So by late Saturday, Julie, Missy, and I crowded into Missy's trailer in order to share some lunch, in order to share some stories, and to share some shelter from the rain. We were trying to figure out what we were going to have for dinner, given that the squirrels had outsmarted us at every step. And Julie said, well, I brought a load of root vegetables from my CSA that I had in my fridge that I was hoping to get rid of. And I don't know about you, but by the end of March, my refrigerator is full of root vegetables from my CSA also. And so I said, well, I have some venison roast from last night's dinner from the deer that I harvested last October. And Missy said, well, my wife Heather loves to cook, so there are sure to be a lot of spices in the camp kitchen, and she sent some bread for us to share. So the three of us gathered around our big camp pot and put all of our vegetables together and our little scraps of things that we could find and made a dinner fit for a king. And really, that's the story of Stone Soup, but I think it's the story of all of us when we come together as community. The pictures in the cookbook for this recipe are actually from the squirrel camp in October, where we did get a squirrel. So there is squirrel meat in there, but the recipe calls for any kind of meat that you have on hand or none at all. And the real key ingredient is community.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to invite Michael Simon to the stage to share about your homemade yogurt.
Great. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be in this cookbook. My name is Michael Simon. I've lived in Ann Arbor since 1983. I moved here to do a residency in internal medicine. And my wife and I received a yogurt maker for our wedding in 1987. And it was somewhat of it's a ceramic container, a yogurt maker. And it sat around for years. I tried to use it. And I think then I was motivated during COVID and just watching the world pass by and what can I do to make my life better, to have less of a greenhouse impact. And so I started making yogurt regularly. You know, I was thinking these 30-ounce containers that we know, there's also smaller containers, but maybe one or two a week, 50 to 75 a year, In 10 years, 500 to 750, and then think about all the people in Ann Arbor. That's a lot of material to recycle or to buy, or to, and so then we think about yogurt and how it ties in with all the other discussions, because yogurt comes from fermentation. So it comes from the digestion of bacteria, our microbiome, or the bacteria that are so all around us. And bacteria grow in culture. It's the same word that we use for art and for music and for history. So thinking about the bacterial cultures that immigrants brought over from other countries to start their yogurt or to start their sourdough or to start their beer or wine. So I think the idea of a yogurt maker is a bit of a misnomer. Talking about community, this morning I had breakfast at Argus Farm Stop, and 3 of the other people at the table make their own yogurt as well, and everybody does it in different ways. They actually have the commercial yogurt makers. This has become my yogurt maker. It's a jar, and this is an important component. It's called a milk stop, and it rattles a little bit. And so one takes the milk, and of course one can make a non-dairy yogurt, which is probably on a higher level. One takes the milk and simmers it for a period of time, and this little milk stop rattles. I say I do it as long as until it gives us a headache at dinner. I usually let it rattle. A big mistake is to turn away until it rattles, because I've had many a pot overflowing with milk, and that's a bit of a pain. I also, another take-home point is that I opened up the book, The Art of Fermentation by Sandor Katz. And he has a lot of ideas about making yogurt, preheating the pots. We need to take care of our bacteria as it's digesting. So I covered the jar with 3 towels. It would probably be better to perhaps put it in the oven with the light bulb on, a little warmer place, or to put it in a cooler that prevents the cold air from coming in and keeps the environment somewhat stable. So, yogurt is wonderful as plain. You could also sweeten it with fruit. You could make it as a sauce, a Greek tzatziki or Indian raita. You could hang it over a bowl of cheesecloth and make labneh or cheese. So making yogurt is a wonderful activity, and it's good for your health.
All right, next up is Elodie Laundrie, who is going to be sharing about tofu summer rolls.
Hi, my name is Elodie. I have lived in Ann Arbor for about 4 years. My family and I live on the north side of Ann Arbor. For the cookbook, I shared one of my favorite recipes that I created with my sister. I call it tofu summer rolls with peanut sauce. Shortly after we moved here, I started making these rolls with my sister. Each time we made them, I experimented with different ingredients. I tried to include fresh, in-season vegetables. Each time I made them, I looked to see what we had available for ingredients. I modified what I was including based on what we had that day. I found that I always tended to include cucumber, avocado, and cabbage. For the peanut sauce, I experimented with different types of peanut butter in amounts and types of ingredients. I enjoy a lot of garlic, so I included a lot. Once I figured out my peanut sauce recipe, I realized I could freeze the extra peanut sauce. After a few years, I finally wrote down a recipe, including vegetables, tofu, and peanut sauce. My neighbor Annie told me about this cookbook, and I decided to share this recipe. I hope you enjoy this recipe as much as I do.
Thank you so much, Elodie. All right, next, Ryan, I'd like to invite you to the stage to share about your tomatillo salsa.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ryan Poe. I've been a farmer for about 40 years. I grew up in Northern California on a polyculture farm, animals, row crops, perennial crops, fruit trees, berries. Moved to Ann Arbor 12 years ago, joined the farming community, and now I'm the farm manager for a 96-acre property called Fior de Lis in Dixboro Village. And I also run the Hungry Locavore, which is an aggregated at-will CSA model. It runs year-round, and it's just about sustainability and education. People can opt in week by week. You can do it once a month, every week. Goes year-round. The menus are themed. And the purpose of the project is basically showcase what the local community can do when we all work together. I chose the tomatillo salsa verde. That's a recipe I grew up with my grandma in her garden and on my dad's farm. And the reason why I chose it is because when you're a kid, you're pretty impatient. And most kids like the strawberries or the rhubarb pie, but I always was savory too. So with the salsa, you can make it in about 20 minutes. It's super simple, super easy. You can blacken it through fire and kind of get a richer taste with it. But you can make enchiladas, fresh salsa out of it. And yeah, I guess that's me in a nutshell. But, yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, Kimmy, it's your turn to talk about taco dip.
Hi, everyone. And some of you look familiar from my work. I'm Kimmy Vandeweghe, first of all, and then I've worked with Sustainable Food Systems at U of M as well, so I've been tabling at some events that I see some familiar faces. But for today, I'm sharing the taco dip recipe. And I guess my connection to Ann Arbor, I'm from Ann Arbor. Bryant, Pattongill, Tap, and Pioneer, for those who are interested. And I'm also, my fiance, Semi, works for the city, so I'm also, pseudo involved with that. Thanks to Zella for putting together this awesome cookbook and I'm so happy and honored to be a part of it. It's such a cool, awesome event. So I'm a registered dietitian and I love to cook and bake, and I'm actually surprised I didn't do a dessert recipe since that's normally my go-to. So that'll have to be the second book that we put together. This recipe is inspired by my mom's taco dip, who's here today. And this, after some research, was my great-great-aunt's recipe, who was a world traveler but lived in Saugatuck, Michigan. I found out yesterday she served this dip on a blue platter, and that was apparently important for my family, so I apologize for not including that in the book. If you have a blue platter, make sure to serve it on that in order of my great-great-aunt. I love making healthier or more plant-based versions of traditional recipes. As a dietitian, I'm always looking for higher fiber recipes or tweaking ingredients here or there to get them just right. Of course, sustainability is a big focus, and plant-forward recipes that use local ingredients where possible are important to find. I wouldn't say I have a green thumb, as my mom, who is an avid gardener, but I've been known to grow a mean cherry tomato. The cooks in the audience know what I mean. Oh, and also, someone was already talking about this, where you bite into that warm, sweet cherry tomato fresh from the garden. That is the same feeling I get when I eat this taco dip recipe, because of course the cherry tomatoes are in it, but I also feel all the warm memories from eating it with my family. I'm excited for you to try it and make it your own.
Thank you, Kimmy. All right, next I'd like to invite Thirupu up to the stage to talk about tomato rice.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My connection to Ann Arbor is two things. One is I always come to Ann Arbor Farmers Market. I also did a cooking demo last year. And when I come to Ann Arbor Farmers Market, the first thing I do is I go to Country Farm. And then only after buying there, then I go check out the other places. And the second connection is my son is studying in University of Michigan, so we are UM community member, and I have some supporters from UMich students. My son's memory that when we go to school or college, we sit under the tree, like 5 or 6 or 10 people. Sometimes the circle is bigger, and at least 2 or 3 people will have that. And every mom has their own style. Some add more tomatoes, some add more cilantro, like that. So everyone has their own touch, but all moms do it every week. So I wanted to share that. They didn't get a stage to say that, so I brought all their recipes here for them. And then the home take, when you are doing, I brought a sample today If anyone wants to try, I have cooked at home. Ours is a vegan home, so it's pretty clean, and I have been cooking for many years. I don't want to say it, then you will guess my age. So, so I'm pretty, and I leave it here with, we have spoons, so everybody can try 1 or 2 spoons, and it is on the spicier level, even though I put only 1 spoon of chili powder. Anyways, and then the thing is, like, if you are cooking at home, there are 2 points that they ask to share when sharing is local foods. So I use tomatoes, onions, and cilantro, this recipe, so that comes local from here. And then the sustainable part is like, in India, we always cooked fresh rice because we didn't have fridge growing up. But if you have leftover rice, you can use it for this. Nowadays, for my kids, that's what I do. If I have leftover rice, I use that. But usually I don't take that risk if I'm sending it to school. Anyways, so, and then the other thing is when you're cooking, you have to let the water reduce and the oil comes up, so that way it'll be more tastier when you mix it up. And today in recipe I used peanut oil, so I just wanted to say that. And the curry leaves and cilantro are optional, so it is a very casual cooking. You don't need to like very specifically cut it and like that. You can use any tomatoes, red tomatoes. I use red tomatoes, and you can make it within 10 minutes, and preparation is 10 minutes, and cooking is 10 minutes, and this does not include the rice. The rice I brought here is the red rice. It's from the southern India, and I have quinoa in it too. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, our next speaker is Stephanie Swanberg, coming to talk about veggie scrap broth.
Hi, everyone. My name's Stephanie Swanberg. I'm a librarian by day and an avid gardener, cook, food preservationist, and a couple other things in there by the other times of the day. So my connection to Ann Arbor, I'm an alumna of U of M, so I did College of LS&A, history major, followed by a graduate degree at the School of Information for Library Science. So always been a very big fan of Ann Arbor. It did so much to influence my life. So this recipe, Easy Veggie Scrap Broth, was a multi-generational recipe. So really a lot of these hobbies came through a generational thread. So my mom, my grandpa, we were all influenced by each other. I think a theme we've heard today is the influence of, as kids, the importance of being exposed to doing activities like this and gardening. So my grandpa inspired my mom inspired me, and this was a recipe I grew up smelling almost every week. If I would come home from school and the house smelled savory, I knew it was going to be broth that was just boiling on the stove for hours on end. So that's something I grew up with, and it's something that was put together by ingredients from the fridge, things from the garden, things that were going to, potentially go bad if we didn't use them. So a very thrifty household. So everyone could potentially do this. All you need is water, and the things you might put immediately in your compost or you might immediately put in the trash could go into your veggie scrap broth. So the recipe in here gives you ideas. It's really a throw together whatever you have. And that's really, again, kind of the original recipe that everyone can make through whatever you have in your pantry or your fridge. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for putting this cookbook on.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I should mention, so many people submitted veggie scrap broth. Ann Arborites love veggie scrap broth. If you haven't tried it, please try it. Okay, last but not least, I'd love to invite Janice Leach up to the stage to talk about Michigan apple pie.
I have my notes. Okay. Hi there. My name is Janice Leach, and I've been a resident of Ann Arbor since I came here as an undergraduate, minus 7 years that my partner and I lived in Toronto for graduate school. My recipe in the Ann Arbor cookbook is my 50-mile apple pie. And the story of the recipe, strangely enough, begins with the black raspberry patch we planted in 1982 when we moved into 2nd Street. My parents-in-law gave us black raspberry cane transplants from their yard in Dearborn. Black raspberries are delicious, precious jewels. And if you're lucky to get some, they deserve to have a pie, to be in a pie. So I learned to make pie from cookbooks and from family recommendations and from the feedback I got, and just to celebrate those berries. Over the years, I made a lot of pies, and at least in my family, whoops, did I bump it? Maybe I did. I gained a reputation for making pretty good pies. Thank you. Then in 2010, Governor Jennifer Granholm signed the Cottage Food Bill, which allowed home bakers to make products that were shelf-stable and low-risk in their home kitchens and to sell them directly to customers without having to do complex licensing. My sister dared me to try something I'd been fantasizing about for years, that is having a pie business. And so I started Why Not Pie. I let my friends and neighbors know what I would bake that week, and then I baked to order. So there was no waste, and for me, no farmer's market guessing whether things would sell. Just delicious pies that greeted happy smiles when I delivered them or when people picked them up from my porch. But over time, I moved to baking in a commercial kitchen. It's much less messy than doing it in your home kitchen. And I had a retail license. So when Argus Farm Stop opened in our neighborhood, I was ready to sell things in a retail setting. Argus enabled me, and I think basically the community and producers, to connect with other people who had the same values, that were interested in locally grown food, in organic or minimally treated foods, things that are made by hand, from scratch, small batch, and let's just say with specific people in mind. So that's one of the things I love about the baking I do. I know who, well, for the most part, who's going to eat it. I share this recipe for an apple pie because apples are plentiful in Michigan. We have them almost year-round, between fresh apples and storage apples. And this recipe calls for things that you can get here too, like Calder butter or Westman Mill flour, bobolin honey, vanilla that I can make at home. So it's truly a local pie, and it's a celebration of local food that is close to here. Thanks.
Thank you everyone so much for sharing your stories and being a part of this project. It was really a joy to hear from you all tonight.
All right, we have come just about to the end of our agenda for this evening. So before we close out, we just wanted to share a few pieces of information. Really quick, I know a lot of you are already contributors to the cookbook, but for those in the audience that haven't had a chance to check out the cookbook, you can find it online, and you can also check it out from the library here. So again, if you would like to take a physical copy home to use, would highly recommend checking it out at the library. But really quick, I'm just going to do a quick overview of a few upcoming events and a few additional ways for you to keep in touch with what we're doing at the Office of Sustainability and Innovations. We always encourage folks to subscribe to our monthly newsletter. It's a great way to hear some narrative and stories around the work that we do. We have a couple printed copies of our current April edition out on our table in the back if you want to check it out. We also always encourage folks to follow us on social media, particularly on Instagram and Facebook at A2ZERO2030. And then we've got some cool events coming up. There's a plant-based sampling at the Farmers Market happening Wednesday, May 6th from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. We also have Bike to Wherever Day coming up at Fuller Park. That's where our team for OSI is going to be. But if you search Bike to Wherever Day Ann Arbor, you can find the website where there's all kinds of little meetup spots for celebrating bike riding all over the city. After that, we've got Huron River Day coming up in Riverside Park on Saturday, May 16th from 12 to 4 p.m. Again, that's just an annual event that's always a fantastic one in Ann Arbor. And as we're celebrating the warm weather coming back, it's a great way to get outside, and OSI will be there as well. And then, of course, we would like to encourage folks to come to the last session of the Sustainability Forums for this year, which is next month on May 26th from 6 to 7:30. We'll be around to chat for a little while, but again, we want to thank you for coming, as has been one of the major themes tonight. Relationships in community is what really brings folks together and moves our city toward resilience and sustainability. So being here in person with us tonight together means a lot. Please join me in thanking our panelists one more time for sharing their evening with us before we head out. And my very final request for you all, if you would be interested and willing, there's a QR code currently up on screen. We have a survey that helps us get a better sense of how folks learn about the events that we host. If you would be willing to scan that and just give us about 60 seconds of your time to fill that out, that helps us just better promote these events that we put on and know what you might be interested in future events. So again, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you to the Ann Arbor District Library for hosting us. We absolutely love using this space and being here, so thank you. And thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a safe evening. Thanks again.